Hello, dear friends. In this video, I would like to talk to you about a very interesting perspective. And maybe it will be possible to change your perception regarding the feelings you have within you. The first feeling is fear. Fear, anxiety, nervousness, worry, these are childhood feelings. This feeling exists to quickly convey to an adult that something new is happening, something I am not prepared to face. So help me resolve this situation and I will feel at ease. And because so many adults were involved in our upbringing, helping us, explaining things to us, not just our parents, but also other older caregivers, they would say, that's just a little cat. You don't need to be afraid of those birds. It's just nighttime. There's nothing and no one in the closet or under the bed. No one is there. Everything is fine. Come here. So first there was fear, then the parent, and then calmness. And calmness comes to the child, right? And calmness comes specifically through fear and someone's involvement. That's why anxiety, you don't control it. I completely understand that. And you understand this. It's a reactive state that comes to you and you simply have it. In order to get rid of it, you need to work through it. Working through it is a whole separate topic. Right now, I'll just talk about what an adult shouldn't have. This is my opinion. I don't claim it's the absolute truth, but think about it for yourself. There is logic in this. Without fear, you can understand that in adult life, when you already know how to live here, how to be, that you don't need to go out the window, there are stairs, you can go down them, that you can't drive through a red light, that you shouldn't eat crushed glass, you shouldn't stick nails or a violin into an outlet, and you shouldn't approach a hot stove. Can you do this without a sense of fear? You can, but you've become so used to the idea that fear must always be associated with something dangerous or anxiety-inducing, that you always turn it on. Exams, for example, right? For some people, fears are stimulating, of course. For some, they help them pull themselves together. Yes, you focus on fear. Some people make assumptions or take certain actions based on fear. We won't talk about that right now, although we could develop a separate topic about fears. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. If you're interested in the topic of fears, well, fear, anxiety, nervousness, worry, I can show you that it's actually possible to live and exist without them. I exist without it. That's perfectly normal. I'm not disabled, so as some psychologists might assume, I got rid of it on purpose. And everyone who takes my more in-depth courses, like the course on growing up, they also get rid of fears, worries, and anxieties about anything. There are special techniques for that. The next feeling that shouldn't be there is the feeling of resentment. Resentment is actually manipulation. It's not even a feeling. I didn't mention it as one. You could call it a feeling, but it's kind of mixed with a sensation, right? There's anger in it, there's self-pity, and fear is also present there. Apathy can come as well, and sadness and so on. It's a combined state that can be called the feeling of resentment. And what do adults do? They manipulate, because most people use manipulation just like they did in childhood. This is also manipulation by adults. But adults have distorted this feeling and experience resentment, even when the person they're resentful toward isn't around. In other words, the manipulation arises even when there's no one to direct it against. That's the distorted feeling, while the child's feeling is aimed at getting something. Because if you ask yourself, what is the purpose of resentment? We've become so used to feeling resentful. It's all around you, around all your acquaintances. Everyone talks about it, about how you shouldn't offend others, that someone is offended, that you offended me, and so on. Just think about resentment itself. What does this feeling bring? It wasn't done my way, and I would like it, or I wanted it to be done my way, for things to be like this and like that. And if you look at adults, there's an even greater distortion. If the feeling of resentment is not satisfied, but the issue that caused the resentment is resolved, the person still continues to feel resentful. But now it's too late. It should have been done earlier, but now it's all over. It's too late. What is that, if not a distortion? That's resentment. It also destroys the person who is holding the grudge. And you can't do anything about it because it arises automatically, runs its course automatically, and only disappears either through a person's willpower or because of their behavior. In other words, changes in the external world are needed for the feeling of resentment in the offended person to subside, or it happens through inducing a sense of guilt in the other person. Oh, did you make them feel guilty? There you go, justice has been served. So resentment is also a remnant from childhood, and at some point it should have withered away. But nothing withers away on its own. and it's necessary to get rid of it. There are open access practices available, such as working through resentment. Some people are interested in how to learn to forgive. Yes, like radical forgiveness, which exists, but it's based on resentment. Why learn to forgive if you need to get rid of being resentful in the first place? Being resentful is not some kind of a inherent state that you can't live without. In fact, it's actually quite easy to live without holding grudges. Some people are like that from birth. For example, I know four people who live without resentment, meaning they simply don't know how to take offense. Kind of fools, right? I agree. That's it. No, that's how my parents raised me. They didn't take offense at their parents. Their parents didn't make them feel guilty, and as a result, they don't have that feeling either. The next thing is the feeling of guilt. Why is it needed? A sense of guilt is necessary in childhood. In some cases, it's needed. Kids are all different, so that the child follows a certain path. That is, if you go down this path, you're guilty, you're not a good person. But if you go down this path, here self-esteem comes into play as well. This is also a childhood state, and an adolescent one too, through which we nurture a person. Self-esteem should be developed during the upbringing process, during the process of a child's development. Because, for example, if he brings a leaf or some drawing, and they tell him, "You're so good, you draw well," he tries hard. It's the same later on in school. He tries hard to please his mom. He makes an effort, takes care of his mom and dad and his younger brothers and sisters so that everyone is happy. He helps his mom. "You're doing great, you're so smart," and so on. In other words, this helps to raise a person who will later be able to adapt and live in society. If it weren't for self-esteem, people would either end up in prison or something similar would happen to them, or they would simply shut themselves off from others. But self-esteem in adult life, I believe, simply ruins and destroys a person. Why? Because self-esteem, first of all, depends on positive feedback, right? Because you were evaluated positively, you did a good job, and so on. So basically, you get compliments and you become dependent on them. You get thanked and you become dependent. Gratitude. You become dependent on it, and without realizing it, your self-esteem starts to control you. You're willing to do a lot just for a thank you. Expectations, yes, when a person invests in a relationship, for what? I want to receive something. There's another mechanism, but self-esteem is involved here too. I want to receive gratitude. I want to be noticed. I want them to show that I'm a good person. Yes. In other words, a good, convenient child, a good, convenient adult child who goes along with things, this is about self-esteem. They also react to some kind of negative remarks. If there is a destructive reaction, should you analyze it? React to it? No, but most people do react. Why? Because it's a childish feeling. You don't control it. I acknowledge all of this. I'm not saying that you have to get rid of it. Just forget about it, right? Become braver, become more confident. Yes, stop feeling fear. Stop being afraid. That's nonsense. It doesn't work. And you know that. And of course, I know that too. I know it's reactive, but all reactivity can be worked through. If it's a feeling, it can be removed from a person. If you're used to relying on that feeling to make decisions, believe me, you can calmly make decisions without it and carry them out just as quickly. And the speed at which you move, for example, whether it's driven by fear or simply by a willful decision that you need to take certain actions to achieve your goal, that depends on you, not on the feeling of fear or anxiety. Yes, or for example, the fear of losing someone, like in relationships. Why do you need that? Even without the fear of losing, knowing that the person has certain needs, you can fulfill those needs for them without the fear of losing. But when relationships are built on the fear of losing, what is that? That's also a one-way street. When you keep pouring yourself in over and over again, and the other person is already full and starts to completely devalue you, and you can't act any other way because you're afraid. So what should you do? You need to work through this reactive state, just like you work on your self-esteem. It would be more correct to get rid of self-esteem altogether. And then, when there is constructive criticism, you know that you can handle it, that you did something wrong, that you are developing your skill, right? Question, are you being assessed or is your skill being assessed? Most often it's the skill that's being judged, even if they say you're all thumbs. But the point is about the skill, about the skill. They are judging the skill, notice that, but for some reason you take all that judgment personally. Why? It's a habit, just like in childhood. If someone said well done or you felt like you were good overall, even if it was just for drawing a picture or making some craft. So that's why it's a habit, a bad habit, John, to judge yourself instead of your skill. And even if you start evaluating the skill and realize that when assessing a skill, you personally don't change, you shouldn't be harmed by it. Evaluation is reactive after all. Isn't self-deprecation also a reactive state? Reactive, of course. So many people, without even being judged, berate themselves and say, I'm a bad person. How could I do that? I yelled, and so on. Is there self-flagellation? There is. What's more, self-deprecation brings evaluation inside you. It's as if you have a hole inside you called self-deprecation. Someone speaks into that hole saying, you're an idiot. You don't understand anything about this topic. Because of self-deprecation, even if you actually understand a topic, you accept what's said and respond, how so? Justify it. Why do you think that? And then for several days, or even months in the worst case, you keep thinking about it. I've talked about guilt, I've talked about self-esteem. There shouldn't be any of this, neither guilt. One more thing about guilt. Is it possible to come to the conclusion that something shouldn't be done without feeling guilty? It hurts a person when you didn't know something about them. Without guilt, of course, you're used to this kind of sadomasochism. You blame another person, and through guilt, they start to understand. Through guilt, they try to act. This is not normal. Then they get sick and you get sick. Because if you believe that the only way to get through to someone is through guilt, that's violence. Because when they start doing something for you out of guilt, it feels so good to you. And what about him? But he doesn't. And to add to that, boys, grown men, they try to run away from guilt. That's why when guilt is imposed on them, they really don't want it. Why? Because it feels just like it did in childhood. And what did you want as a child? When your mom was accusing you? You wanted to get away from that conversation as quickly as possible. And it seems like he's doing what he's supposed to. It seems like everything is fine, but somehow he's unhappy, he's sad, he seems burdened by something. Because he feels guilty, because he's doing all of this in torment. Not from the heart, not from a place of understanding, realizing that it would make you happy. What else shouldn't be there? Self-pity. Obviously, this is a childish feeling. Self-pity, so that mom, brothers, dad, grandma, grandpa would feel sorry for me. And it really takes root in us. Even if you weren't pitied as a child, you saw examples of how other children received pity. They were pitied. And for you, this became an experience, a way to save yourself. Because for us, survival is the most important thing here. The psyche doesn't understand that no one is attacking you anymore, but self-pity really helps you hide behind someone. Someone somewhere might even make decisions for you. That's it. Before it was adults, later it became friends. And this self-pity is also a reactive state. It turns on by itself. Of course, you can create an intrapersonal conflict, telling yourself, don't be a wimp, get stronger. And you'll feel the tension as your self-pity starts to battle with this new belief inside you. And they fight. Just like love and lack of love for oneself. When a person doesn't love themselves, well, I can talk about that separately. And when someone starts to love themselves intensely, they begin to love themselves and hate everyone else around them. Or they might hate or accept everyone as they are. It depends on who gave you this strange belief that you have to love yourself. I would say, to put it simply, you need to get rid of your lack of self-love. That is, a lack of self-love is a matter of self-deprecation. You have a mechanism of self-deprecation and you need to get rid of it. In order to get rid of it, you need to work through it, cut it out surgically, not go into strategic psychology. So how should you behave in order to feel yourself? You already feel yourself, you already have something within you. If you don't get rid of this, you will simply, as I said before, create an intrapersonal conflict. That will be fighting within itself. One side of the conflict and the other side. One side has been with you since birth, not birth, but since childhood, and the other you acquired in adulthood. And as they say, develop your strengths and get rid of your weaknesses. I'm telling you honestly, you need to get rid of the old, the outdated things, the garbage that gets in the way, the childish remnants. They should fall away, but they don't. You have to work through them. For now, that's the only option. And there's no need to develop anything or search for self-love. You simply remove what is already there and holding you back. And one more thing, attachment. Yes, attachment is a major global mechanism of the psyche. There's a lot involved there, including everything we've mentioned. Attachment can exist in children, you see. Only children are attached to their parents in order to survive, so that the parents can guide them through life, so that they can reach independence. They need to be attached. Emotional attachment, yes, physical attachment, as we know, and mental attachment. We pick up behavioral patterns from our parents. Attachment, there shouldn't be any of it either. It also needs to be worked through. Even if you think you've separated from your parents physically, started earning independently, and are helping your parents emotionally and mentally, you are still repeating your parents. You find similar partners, live out similar scenarios, or you live out a counter scenario. This is the opposite of the scenarios you had with your parents. Either you repeat your parents' scenarios with each other, or towards yourself, or you try to fulfill emotional needs. Emotional needs stemming from attachment to parents is a matter of emotional and mental separation. Physical separation alone is not enough, and this also needs to be worked through. There are methods to work through all of this. You can look for what I've already mentioned on YouTube. On my channel, there are free resources for working through things like resentment or fears. You can work through them, and you can also work on your self-esteem. Or you can go to my Telegram channel, where you'll also find resources for working through fears. And I almost forgot. There are also materials on sadness, apathy, and despondency. But that's a separate mechanism as well, and I can talk about it too. It's not entirely a childhood remnant, but it does partly come from childhood. In other words, those feelings, sadness, melancholy, despondency, should have also fallen away. But for some people, this develops into depression, and there are also resources for working through that, including the antidepressant course, which is available for free. Please go ahead, check it out, study it. That's it. You can get rid of anything. Whatever has formed inside you, it doesn't matter, even if it was repeated to you a million times. A million times, but the mechanism is the same. Do you understand? That is, for you, it's all the same, like attachment. Attachment to a dog, attachment to a lifestyle, attachment to a home, attachment to a person, attachment to children, attachment to only this job. Attachment is just one thing. The only difference is the various elements or objects you're attached to. But the attachment itself is the same here, and you can also get rid of it. And when you free yourself from attachment, you're not leaving behind what is good, but rather you're letting go of what used to bring you pain, and from which you couldn't escape because of emotional attachment. Everything can be removed. The Telegram channel Dadoki link is in the description under this video. Go there, check it out, watch, and you can take the courses. We'll be happy to see everyone. Okay.